last question. I'd love to keep going, but you can see that we've only covered half the story, and that's and only barely that, and that's on the U.S. side. Just for a moment, Prime Minister Israel is heading into what I think is going to be his toughest re-election battle ever, because he has defused all of his challengers over time from the left. But he has a series of parties now, not just on the left, but increasingly on the center left, that are saying they'll never serve with him. So even if he Netanyahu and Likud get the most seats, and he has perhaps the first bite at the apple in terms of building a coalition, he is starting to run out of coalition partners that he may have. A big breakaway, obviously, now from the right, from Gideon Sa'ar, who was his number two for a long time, and now for a number of reasons, we won't get into the specifics, but you've known Netanyahu a long time. How do you see this March 23rd race shaping up?
It's going to be tough for him. I think, well, there's not a comparable situation between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, because they're very different personalities completely. But on the other hand, the one similarity is that they have managed to alienate not just their enemies, but their friends. And that's always a tough thing. Now, in the case of the Prime Minister, he's had to be a strong leader. He's had to take tough and uncompromising stands for the security of the nation. And Israel would not be in the strong position that it's been in economically and militarily and diplomatically had it not been for Netanyahu, who was a master of building global relationships. But sometimes a person, the longer one stays, the harder it is to remain in the good graces of people, because everybody looks at your political life from their own unique lens. And I often said, I was governor for nearly 11 years. That was a long time. And I've been a strong believer in term limits, even for myself, because I do think that there comes a point at which you've promoted your best ideas, you've brought in your own people, but you don't want to create something that is unchangeable, because the genius of our, I guess, I won't say democratic way of government, because we're really a republic, not a democracy. And Israel is much more that way, too, where you elect the representatives. But you need to have a flow of people. It's harder to be corrupted when you're only there a short time. And I think corruption is not necessarily something that is illegal. Sometimes it's a matter of saying, look, I've been here long enough that we're going to do it my way, because we just are. That can be really hurtful to the long-term political process. I love Benjamin Netanyahu. I think he has been a magnificent, not just leader for Israel, but for the world. And if one thinks about the fact that Israel is a very small country, it has had a disproportionate influence on the rest of the world, and a disproportionate sense of even maybe recognition and its input to the rest of the world. That's largely because of him.
No, I think you're right. Oh, so finish your point. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I think it increasingly is hard for him, part because he's had so many things thrown against him. He's faced, as did President Trump, nothing but headwinds. The press has never been fair to him. They've always misinterpreted everything that he did. And the institutions of government have often been against him. That makes it tough.
Mm-hmm. I think it's an astute analysis that you give, though, and a fair one, especially coming from a friend. You've been quite candid about both of these friends of yours and their strengths and their challenges and even some of their weaknesses. I think that what intrigues me about the challenges that Netanyahu is facing from the right is that many of the leaders now, or the deputies within the other parties, are former chiefs of staff for him, or senior advisors, or key political allies. You talk about Gideon Sa'ar. Many of these names evangelicals don't know. So they know Netanyahu, that's the brand, and everybody else is sort of like, never heard of him. But if you look at Gideon Sa'ar, he was the number 2 in Likud. You look at Avigdor Lieberman, the head of another party now, won't ever serve with Netanyahu. He was the chief of staff for Netanyahu. Naftali Bennett was chief of staff for Netanyahu. Now runs an entirely different party. Ayelet Shaked, Bogi Ya'alon. The list is getting longer and longer, and it's going to be a very interesting election. We're going to be covering it very closely. We'd love your analysis as we go, but I don't want to overstay my my welcome with you. Appreciate you being candid and helping us sift through some very challenging moments. Governor Mike Huckabee, thank you so much for being on All Israel News.
Thank you, Joe. Great to be with you.
Great to be with you. Thank you, sir.